The Porsche 911 SC. Is this the most underrated, unloved and undervalued Porsche 911 ever produced by Stuttgart? Well, welcome to Porschenomics. Let's find out.
I don't get nervous, but I'm starting to get a bit shaky, you know what I mean? I'm a little bit weak.
Porschenomics 2911's been reversed out of the garage. Take 76, believe it or not.
A few moments later.
Russell, give us a little quick test for us.
Sound check. Hi, this is Russell. This is Porschenomics. We're talking bollocks about Porsches and 911s again. Someone might even watch and listen to this. Who knows? Is that good enough?
Perfect. Yeah, nice one.
This then, the Porsche 911 SC, I reckon kind of almost the fourth generation of 911. Obviously the first was the F Series, then you had the G Body 2.7, which now of course again very, very valuable car because of its rarity, then the 3-litre Carrera, and then this thing, the 911 SC Super Carrera. 60,000 made, and a lovely, lovely old thing, albeit the least loved, you could argue, of the Porsche 911 series. Hence, you can still pick these up for £35,000 to £40,000. Although a nice one, here's an FYI, Paul Stevens currently have one as we're shooting this in brown, and it's a left hooker at over £70,000. So I think these are incredibly good value, entry-level 911s, undervalued, underloved, and actually not underwhelming, pretty overwhelming. Let's just talk about the car. This one in particular, this is an SC Sport. This takes me back to my car salesman days, this does.
Here's the man, right here, here's the man.
The Sport, denoted by old school sports seats. These are worth a lot of money apparently. Larger Fuchs, 16-inch. This rubber whale tail, which apparently was only on the car for a year or two. All rubber. Don't get carried away.
You naughty, naughty.
Later on, of course, this was a mixture of plastic with a rubber lip, but on the 78, 79 Sports rubber. This also has these. Do you remember these from years and years and years ago? Driving lights. These things, I hope these covers have probably never been off, but back in the day, they denoted that you were in a very sporty car. Driving lights. Headlamp washers. And apart from that, a standard 911 SC, a very, very lovely old thing. And in a minute, we're going to drive it and talk about how it feels. So, but before we drive the car, I want to tell you a little story. The 911 SC arguably is also an extremely important car from a Porsche enthusiast perspective because it was almost the last 911 that was ever made. Around about 1977-78, the CEO at the time, Ernest Fuhrmann, had decided in his wisdom that the 911 was going to be cancelled and that the 928, the front engine 928, was the future of Porsche. How wrong was he? Luckily, he was fired, bless him, and a new CEO came along and decided through popular opinion and hopefully lots of lobbying from customers and indeed from inside the Porsche organisation that the 911 would live on, as indeed it did, because of course later on the 911 SC got more horsepower, then they introduced the 3.2 Carrera, and then of course the 964, which we will also be talking about in this video. So I think the SC needs to take some real credit for having done an awful lot of heavy lifting on behalf of the Porsche community and us Porsche enthusiasts, aficionados if you like, because it was almost the last Porsche 911 that was ever produced. Thank goodness it wasn't. And as a consequence of that, surely these cars should be more expensive, shouldn't they?
SC.
911 SC?
911 SC.
How random is this?
Lovely car. I had one myself.
Hang on, let me come over, hang on. Andy, yeah?
Yes, Andy, yeah. Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, very, very good. So Andy's just pulled up just now. We said, we've got to get this on video. He's literally just pulled up and gone, 911 SC, I had one of those. What's your story?
Well, so back in early 2000s, I've had a few air-cooled SCs, but I bought I flew up to Manchester with £8,000 in my pants, and drove home with a 911 SC. Backdated it to 73 RSR, 1115 Fuchsies, and a big 930 turbo engine, 700 horsepower turbo engine.
So would you rather have now a 911 SC or an old classic 911 rather than something new like a 991 or a 992?
Early, without doubt, air-cooled without doubt.
Isn't it funny how they like capture the imagination, don't they?
Incredible cars.
Do you regret selling yours?
I regret selling all of them, yeah, for sure. Because I mean, you know, like a 69S,
Yeah.
70E.
So you hang on, the 69 911S, which you bought or sold for how much?
Bought that, I think, for 7,000, 8,000. No, it's £6,500.
Wow. So just to think, if you still had that car now, you probably only lost £160,000.
Yeah.
Mate,
no,
thank
I'm off.
you.
No,
Cheers.
lovely car.
Thanks for stopping. Seriously. Wow. Let's have a go in this old banger, shall we? When I say old banger, some of you probably think it is. 1979 cars, what's that, 45 years old. Bottom of the 911 range in terms of old classic 911s and value. Yeah, maybe the lunatics amongst you might see this as something that you simply wouldn't want to own. But I got to tell you, anybody in the Porsche community, anyone that knows anything about Porsches and 911s, yeah, they love this stuff. And I think the 911 SC hopefully won't continue to be underloved and undervalued for much longer. I think these should be 60 grand, frankly, even though you can pick them up still for 40 to 50 depending on condition. Okay, let's have a blast, shall we? Let's see. We said earlier as well that this was introduced with less brake horsepower than the 3-litre Carrera and only had 180 brake horsepower because of the lack of courage, shall we say, of the American Porsche market and of course the ridiculous policies of the American government at that time. Something about something called emissions or something, I don't know, went over my head frankly. Anyway, 180 brake horsepower, but bear in mind this car only weighs about a tonne, it's about 1,000 kilos, so it's not a heavy thing. 180 brake horsepower, I mean back in the day, late 70s, early 80s, XR3i's and Peugeot 205 GTI's, Renault 5 turbos, what were they, 120, 130? Got to tell you, this thing, not only does it not hang about, it's still 0 to 60 in 5 and a bit seconds, top speed of about 150, 160 miles an hour, which I don't care who you are or where you are, is certainly enough to lose your licence in a big way, so should be plenty fast enough for most people. I personally, honestly, don't go in for this stuff. You know, you've got to have the latest, fastest thing, whether it be a hot hatch, whether it be a Porsche 911, whether it be a Ferrari, whether it be a Lambo. All this nonsense, frankly, about 800 brake horsepower turbo S's and Hurricanes and Ferraris with 1,000 brake horsepower that are a combination of, I don't know, some kind of electro magic with a internal combustion engine. No one needs 1,000 brake horsepower, don't be stupid, of course you don't. That is just kind of a point, squirt, get to a corner, shit yourself frankly, slam on the brakes. That isn't driving. Driving is getting an old thing like this that sounds lovely, goes pretty well and has got character. And where actually, as you're driving it, you have to kind of work it a little bit. You have to kind of go through the gears. You have to use the gears. Manuals, by the way, it's no coincidence that even on newer cars now, performance cars, particularly Porsche and Ferrari, a manual car is worth 10 to 20% more than an F1 on a Ferrari or a PDK on a Porsche. And that's because manuals are proper driver's cars. PDKs, and sorry if I'm going to offend anybody here, and F1s, they're automatics. My gran's got an automatic only licence, just saying. Proper cars, manual. And that's why this, as old as it is, and as raw and as basic as it is, it makes for a driver's car, right? And I think there's a lot to be said for that in terms of driver involvement, character, and it's why, thank you, it's why these things are so sought after. They're a beautiful thing. Can you hear it? Honestly, the sound, just the whole feel of the car, bearing in mind, on this car and the next one, the 3.2 Carrera, no power steering, no traction control, no ABS, no stability control. It's got a steering wheel, it's got 3 pedals, it's got a gear lever, and you have to bloody drive it, because that's what driving is. And if you enjoy driving, well, you'd want to be in one of these, wouldn't you? Okay, I go back to the point about value. 40, 45 grand for one of these. It's an exciting, involving experience, and genuinely, I would rather have one of these than something quicker, super modern, and more expensive. Interested in your comments. Slag me off by all means. I don't care, because I'm right. This is a piece of work.
And so, to really nail what the 911 SC is all about, we thought we'd speak to some experts, some people from within the Porsche community, and one of the top dogs at Porsche Cars Great Britain that looks after the 911 SC register.
Okay, so this 911 SC thing, let's talk to a proper expert about the Porsche 911 SC, Barry Gale, who's the boss man of the 911 SC register at the Porsche Club of Great Britain. How do we find him? Wow. Barry, thanks for joining me.
Well,
thanks for
first,
talking to
you're
me.
very kind to say I'm the boss man, but yeah, one of the technical advisors for the 911 SC group for the Porsche Club of Great Britain.
Sharing the love there. So
Sharing
there's
the
a few of
love,
you.
and there are 5 of us. We split the role between us, but yes.
Yeah,
Very,
but you're a bit of an expert on these cars.
maybe, yeah.
So let's talk about what the 911 SC is.
Well, of course, we all know that's the Super Carrera.
Okay. Slight bone of contention, but we'll come back to that.
That's right,
So
yeah.
the 911 Super Carrera, introduced in what year?
1977 for the 77-78 model year.
Okay, following on from what was the very, very famous and now worth a lot of money, the 3-litre Carrera.
Yeah.
Fair to say that in 77, 78, when the 911 SC was introduced, it was perhaps not as well received by some Porsche owners and Porsche enthusiasts as perhaps it might have been off the back of the 3-litre?
Yeah, I think off the back of the 3-litre, I think it was also the whole federal emissions. And you know, spoiled a lot of cars. Some people still weren't in love with the impact bumpers, a bit like MGBs with rubber bumpers.
Yeah.
But yes, it did launch with only 180 horsepower, so quite down on the 3-litre Carrera.
Yeah.
But
So it's a bit underweight, but was that for the US market?
I think it was primarily the US market, lower compression ratios, lower quality fuel in the States.
Yeah. So
But
a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, for many. I mean, I loved it. The first time I saw one, I was only, whatever I was, 14, 15 at the time, but yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
It partly corrected in 1980-81 with the 204 horsepower version.
Yeah.
And
Which I believe one of these is.
yeah, this one here is, and it's a lovely car with that 3-litre engine. It's got a lovely power band to it.
Yeah.
It's got a real kick.
Yeah.
The later cars, the 3.2, has got a lot more torque.
Yeah.
But the SC, many people see it's the last of the one with a proper power band on
And
it.
of course, lots more 3.2 Carreras built. So the 3.2 was built for a longer period of time. It seemed to be kind of more prevalent, I suppose. How many SCs were built worldwide?
We believe it's in the region of 60,000 worldwide.
Worldwide, so for all markets.
Yeah.
We're not quite sure how many the UK got, and
No.
I'll ask you a question on that, which you're going to come back to me about. So we'll put that as a narrative on the bottom if you can find out how many are in Britain.
Certainly the chassis numbers are normally in groups of things like US or rest of world in Europe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't seen any for just the UK, but we'll see what we can find out for you.
Yeah, thank you. And probably quite a rare thing that we've actually got a few of them together in one place. We've just been to a thing today in Westerham, Legends Driving, which is an event that's held every month at Westerham in Kent, and lots and lots of air-cooled stuff, lots of 911 SCs there, and we're going to be talking to a couple of 911 SC owners in a second. Barry, thank you. A lover of the car, clearly.
Yes, very much.
Good,
Pleasure.
understandably so. Thanks.
Cheers.
Right, so let's talk to some proper 911 SC owners. You might recognise these two guys, Andy and Guy, very, very well known in the Porsche community. Let's first of all, Andy, let's clear up this Super Carrera thing, because it's not a Super Carrera, is it? It's a 911 Sport Carrera, right?
No.
No.
It's a Super Carrera.
How can you be so sure?
Well, there was a lot of conjecture about it, and I thought, when I picked my car up, I'd be a little bit of a nerd and buy all of the original sales brochures. And I
From the 1970s?
From the 70s and 80s, and I can confirm, after a couple of purchases, because the first set I bought was in German, not much
Okay.
use to me anyway. The second set I bought was in English, and it is Super Carrera.
Super Carrera. Why do we think it was called the Super Carrera? I mean, bearing in mind, it had big shoes to fill in terms of the car that it superseded, as we were saying to Barry earlier. The 3-litre Carrera, which now is really, really desirable. Yeah, why didn't they call it the Super Carrera? Almost like it was a better car, but as we've just rehearsed, really, it had 180 brake horsepower and was decidedly underweight compared to the car that it came after. So it seems a bit of a weird thing to call it, really, even though we know it's the SC, right?
Yep. I guess the Carrera, is a synonymous with sports participation for Porsche, and then I guess if you're going to sell something a little bit more, then Super Carrera would kind of make sense. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it's German kind of sales speak from the
Patter.
1980s.
Patter, yeah. Right, let's talk about the popularity of the SC as well, Guy. Right, so you guys have both got other cars, right? But today, of all days, lovely day, winter, bit of sun, no salt on the roads. We've all chosen to come out in SCs. The cheapest 911 you can buy, so you can still pick them up like we have for not that much money relative to other 911s. So the cheapest entry-level 911, but we all still choose to get in them, drive them, and love them, even though we might have a 991 or a 997 sitting in the garage.
I think when it is dry, I think, especially mine being a Targa, I basically think, well, why am I owning this car? It's a dry day. There's no salt on the road, it's not raining, why wouldn't I take that car?
Yeah.
And as we found today, we've done a convoy, including the GT4, we've been out with RSs, and actually, they'll do 80, 90,
Yeah.
They'll keep up on a motorway,
But it's funny how we still have this hankering for this kind of old school analogue thing, even though most people would buy a car. So if they were to buy a new Ford or a Vauxhall, they buy the latest thing. They buy the latest thing on the basis that it's got all the mod cons and so on. We're almost the opposite of that. We jump into something that's got no ABS, no power steering, a very, very antiquated gearbox that's been around for 50 odd years.
Yep.
Why do we do that? What is it about 911 owners that still love the old classics?
Well, I guess I've got the most modern 911. I've got.
So you've got a 992?
I've got a 992. I've got a 996. I've got a 991. Very lucky, and the 911 SC.
But did you have a smile on your face today when we were driving back from Sevenoaks and
Yeah.
to Sevenoaks?
And that's the whole point of it, right? You have more of a smile on your face driving that in today's traffic with larger sidewalls on your tyres, not too.
And you, Guy?
Yeah, I mean, we've been out with RSs and stuff, and they've got, as he says, larger sidewalls, more ground clearance.
Sounds old and a bit rattly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Old air-cooled thing, but it's all part
You don't
of the
worry
character,
about it.
part
Don't
of the
worry
charisma,
where you
isn't it?
leave it. It's got bumps and scratches. It's old, like me, so it's fine.
So here's the last question. So on the basis that, as I've said, it's the entry-level 911. I mean, you can still pack up an SC for late 30s, maybe 40 grand, one that might need a little bit of work.
Yep.
It's kind of a bit unloved still, as it was when it was first introduced. Why is there such a gap between an SC and a 964, but even an SC and a 3.2 Carrera? Why is there such a gap in price?
So I think that when you look at the classifieds, as we all do, and you pick them up for 25, 30 potentially, people don't appreciate that there are two sorts of SCs. Probably goes for a lot of air cools, two sorts. They've either been restored or they need restoring, and there's almost nothing in between. And these old cars, at the end, they are dealing with Porsche parts. There are spares, but you're going to do a respray, and before when you take them apart, there's an awful lot that goes into doing a restoration.
Parts costs, even if you go for patent parts, we use a
Exactly.
Heritage or Design 911, etc. Labour is obviously not going to be cheap. So do we think there's room for them to increase in value? Now, I know we're all biased because we've all got one, so we're bound to say, yeah, definitely. But to me, there seems to be this disparity, this kind of irregularity between an SC, even a nice one at 50, 55 grand, versus a 964 at, let's say, 90 grand. There's got to be a reduction in that gap with the SC going up, don't you think?
I think the beauty of them is if you can pick one up for 35 to 40 grand, which is a bit ribby now.
Not for long.
Not for long at all. I think we've had that sort of suppressed and correction in the market, and now I think you're starting to take off again. But you've also got the opportunity to put your own sort of 5, 10, 15 grand into it, bring it along as you want to your own taste.
Yeah.
Whereas if you buy a car for 80, 90 grand, you're less likely to spend that money personalising it, where you can really personalise these cars.
Yeah.
and you don't really care if you leave it in Sainsbury's car park. That's
because
the
it's
beauty
not
of
that
it.
precious.
Exactly.
Exactly, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. So, well, so I think this video alone is probably going to make prices lift about 15, 20 grand, don't you?
Absolutely.
Let's hope so.
Fluffing
Fine.
away.
Guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It ain't slow. There's no flies on this. Talk about this, the 964, introduced in 1989, took over from the 3.2 Carrera, was produced up until 1993. 60,000 of these were made, which is exactly the same number as those. Exactly the same, about 60,000 cars worldwide. In the UK right now, according to howmanyleft.com, there's about 1,000 Carrera 2, Carrera 4 coupes in the UK, and that's a combination of stuff that's off the road, on the road, those that have been resto modded and backdated and so on. How is it different? Well, first of all mod cons inside. Still got the same G50 gearbox as the 3.2 Carrera, but a shorter shift. The 964 also the first 911 to have power steering and also ABS, and a tidied up cabin. The interior in terms of the dials, very, very traditional 911, but the whole thing has got a little bit more of a modern feel versus the older cars. Electric windows still, central locking, sunroof is an option. This car, by the way, is not a standard 964 Carrera 2. It's actually got oversized 17-inch Fuchs style wheels. When I bought it from JZM, it had just had KW suspension fitted. It's also had a complete windows out bare metal repaint and also an engine build, because believe it or not, in 89-90, these cars were built where the engines didn't have gaskets. So literally the engine was built metal to metal. Lo and behold, hey, surprise, surprise, 10, 15, 20 years on, they start to leak oil. So this has been rebuilt actually with 993 gaskets. Talking of engine, this is the other big difference with the 964 over the previous model, the Carrera 3.2 and indeed the SC. Still a flat six, still air-cooled, very importantly, we love an air-cooled, but a 3.6 litre twin plug. So it took brake horsepower up to about 250 brake horsepower. So nippy enough, I reckon. A very desirable thing, but the question I ask, is this worth twice as much as that? That's about 45 to 50 grand. A nice one of these with decent mileage, proper provenance and so on. 964s now, because of their relative rarity, because they are being snapped up by the likes of Singer and so on, as we talked about in other videos, and because they've had a bit of a renaissance, I think, as a car, you know, let alone the resto mod thing, 90 to 100 grand. Is there that much difference? Well, you tell me. Tell me what you think in the comments. And by the way, if you're liking this and the content that we're producing, me and Tom here, let's have you subscribing, liking, and maybe commenting as well. Don't be shy. Right, so we are in the 964, and as you can probably see in here, it goes all right. If I was to say that there is no difference between the 911 964 and the 911 SC, I'd be lying. Of course, there is a difference. This is a slightly more refined car. It's a quicker car. That 250 brake horsepower takes this car to 60 a bit quicker than it will a 3.2 Carrera or an SC. Is it a better car? Well, look, I suppose it depends who you ask. Ask 100 Porsche fans if they think this is a better car than the SC, you probably get 100 different answers. Some will favour it, some won't. It all depends who you ask. So, yes, it's more refined. Yes, it's quicker. A few more mod cons. That power steering, that ABS, it makes it a slightly easier car to drive, I suppose, whilst, I would argue, still maintaining some integrity when it comes to being a classic air-cooled 911, which it is. I mean, it's certainly got no traction control, there's no stability control, there's no ASC, PSM, ABC, XYZ, whatever. So it is still pretty raw, pretty visceral, but not quite as raw and visceral as the SC. And as I say, some will prefer this car, some will prefer the Super Carrera. And look, there's no doubt that the 911 964 it's bound to be a slight improvement, isn't it, over a car that was conceived and started to be produced in 1977 versus this car that of course came along 10 to 12 years later. But up to you to decide really whether you think that gap between an SC and a 964 should really be 10 grand or 20 grand rather than what it is, which is basically a doubling in price. That difference between 45 to 50k or 90 to 100k for one of these. Is this car worth twice the money? It's worth a bit more. Not sure it's worth 40 or 50 grand more, is it? Although it is fun. Okay, so that is the end of this video, this summary, this analysis, if you like, of this car, the Porsche 911 964, versus this car, the Porsche 911 3-litre SC. Yes, there's a big difference, I guess you could say, if you're a Porsche purist. In fact, some people shun the 964, pretty much like when they were a year or two old. You could pick these things up for about 15 grand. A lot of people think these are too pure because of the fact that they are a more engineered vehicle, particularly in terms of things like ABS, power steering, coilover suspension, etc. But the fact still remains, this is a 911, this is a 911. They're only 11 years apart, but there's a difference of a huge 40 to 50,000 pounds in value. This at 90 to 100k, this at 45 to 50k, of course, depending on condition. So I guess I ask you really what the conclusion is. Do you think that this is worth twice that, or that's worth half that? Let me know in the comments. Let me know why. And obviously, if you like this, please perhaps like and subscribe to the video. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Porschenomics.